The track DOA was the second single released from In Your Honor. And the drums enter on beat 4 with the open hi-hats. And then we've got a simple 8th note time pattern on the hi-hats, accenting what would be our backbeat 2 and 4. Only we don't accent the 4 in the second bar, but rather we open the hi-hat on the end of beat 4, giving us this 2-bar pattern. Again, I'll bring the hi-hat in on beat 4. With that little fill at the end of the 8-bar verse section, which is just the last 2 16th notes of beat 3 and then beat 4 on the crash cymbal, we're into the verse. So let's just analyze the end of that last 2-bar pattern that takes us into the verse. So now we've got our 2-bar verse pattern, and we're playing 8th notes on the floor tom, and beats 2 and 4 on the snare. We're also playing the last 8th note of our 2-bar pattern up on the rack tom. So let me play it with just the bass drum and snare drum part, so you can hear the movement of the kick drum, and it's not disguised by the sound of the floor tom. So here's the kick and snare part in isolation. After 8 bars of that pattern, we've got a slight variation where the bass drum just moves to playing all of the upbeat 8th notes. So again, let's just hear the kick and snare in isolation, and then we'll add the floor tom. There are a couple of anticipations through this 8-bar section, and in fact it's the same 4-bar cycle twice essentially. So after 2 bars we're hitting the last 8th note of the second bar up on the crash cymbal, and we do the same thing after 4 bars, but it's set up slightly differently. So I'm going to play that as an 8-bar section, and notice at the end of the 8 bars we stop on the downbeat in preparation for the crash, which is on the downbeat. It's not anticipated going into the chorus. The chorus actually starts on the downbeat. So here's the 8-bar bridge section. Again, starting with the anticipation, so on the last 8th note of the previous bar. So now we're into the first chorus, which is made up of 2 different feels. Our first one is a hand-to-hand 16th note pattern, which lasts for the first 4 bars and ends in an anticipation, which takes us into the second 4 bars, which is riding up on the crash cymbal. So I'll play that 8-bar chorus cycle slowly for you. So notice a couple of things there. Again, we've got that anticipation at the end of the first 4 bars, and just right, left, right, up onto the crash cymbal. And we've also got a crash on the last eighth note after 8 bars. And I'm playing that, just crashing both the cymbals with this hand. You could obviously bring the left hand up to play it that way. So here's that end of the 8 bars again, just to show you what I mean, to take us back into the hand-to-hand 16th note pattern. After this chorus, we've got a 2-bar reprise where the drums carry on with the hand-to-hand 16th note pattern, and then we're back into the verse feel on the floor tom. So here's what's played there. We just hit the downbeat of the first bar with the crash, and then there's no more bass drum. So it sounds like this. From there, we're into the second verse, which is made up of 2 8-bar sections, playing the same thing as before, playing writing the 8th notes on the floor tom. So let me play the last 4 bars of the chorus, showing that 2-bar reprise into the verse feel. Notice that transition from the reprise into the next verse. We're ready to play the first 2 8th notes there on the bass drum in order to lock in with the guitar riff straight away. So once you've hit beat 4 on that last section, you've got to get ready with this floor tom pattern and playing the first 2 8th notes. So once again. Moving on to the middle 8 now. And we're carrying on the bass drum pattern that we had in the verse, but we're now playing time on the hi-hat, crashing the downbeat of the first bar and beat 4 of the second bar. So we get this 2-bar cycle that lasts for the first 4 bars of this middle 8 section. Then we move up to the crash cymbal, and we've got this slightly more syncopated feel for the next 8 bars, and that sounds like this. That 8-bar section finishes with a simple single-stroke 16th note fill on the snare after a flam on beat 3. And then we go back to the 2-bar hi-hat pattern that we had for the 4 bars before that. So let me play for you the last 4 bars of that syncopated feel with the fill back into the hi-hat, which then, that section then lasts for another 8 bars. So here we go. Into the bridge section now, and we're playing the upbeat 8th note on the bass drum, the same as we were when we were playing the floor tom, and we're crashing the last 8th note every 2 bars. So and we've got 4 bars of this pattern, and that sounds like this. Then we move that same pattern up to the crash cymbals, only we're hitting the upbeats on the crash cymbals as well. So it's the and of every beat along with the bass drum on the crashes. And you can move this between various crash cymbals as well. So that's going to sound like this. that takes us then into the final chorus. So let's hear the transition from that upbeat crash cymbal variation into the final chorus feel. Occasionally in the chorus, there's a variation on that simple fill that we've got at the end of the first 4 bars. Originally we had this. But occasionally you'll hear it starting 1 beat earlier and moving down the kit. Let's hear that in context. The track ends with 3 choruses. At the end of the 3rd chorus, there's a 2-bar turnaround that happens twice. And then we're into the hi-hat feel that has the same bass drum pattern as we had in the verse. And so let me play those last 12 bars for you slowly. With that final fill, you've crashed beat 4 of the bar before it. You've got to get ready to play the last 16th note and then the downbeat of the next bar, which is probably easiest played left-right in preparation for the fill through the last bar. So here's the last bar of time into that final fill. So that concludes our look at all of the drum parts for DOA.